Let's spin things forward to this week. This here is video of Lamar Jackson at Ravens practice earlier this week. Today, Jackson had his first full practice since injuring his hamstring in a Week 4 loss to the Chiefs. Now, when asked today whether his former NFL MVP will start against the Bears, John Harbaugh said, we'll see what happens Sunday. Tyler Huntley would start if Jackson can't go.
See, that's how you do it, Aaron Glenn. Like, that's real intrigue right there. There's a big drop-off between Lamar Jackson and Snoop Huntley. But with Aaron Glenn being like, Tyrod, nobody cares. This is how you do it, and John Harbaugh's trying to be cute. And good on you.
Are we talking about Pro Bowl quarterback Snoop Huntley?
Just saying, listen.
Pro Bowl quarterback
Pro
Snoop
Bowl,
Huntley?
yeah. Okay, you know what? I will trade you Snoop Huntley for Lamar Jackson if you feel that way.
Anyway, obviously, having Lamar Jackson back in the lineup clearly changes things for both sides, right? The Bears defense, the Ravens offense for sure. But as we look at this Bears-Ravens game coming up this week, Rank, what are you looking at?
One of the most impressive things is how well the Bears' rushing attack has played over the last couple of weeks. It was something that Ben Johnson talked about coming out of the bye, that it kept him up at night. He was really worried about it. And now over the last 2 weeks, it's been running on all cylinders, which is why you can start DeAndre Swift. Sorry, I forgot. You got to run the animation. Not only DeAndre Swift, I would also say that if you're debating whether you can get Kyle Monangai out there as well, I think you can. But DeAndre Swift, as you see right there, has 130 scrimmage yards and a touchdown in back-to-back games. Now, the haters, all the Lions fans loved social media. Who did you play? I don't know. The NFL teams that were on the schedule. That's exactly who they played. Guess who they're playing now? The Ravens, who've allowed the second most fantasy points per game to running backs this season. So I know it's probably going to take like 30 weeks before you haters will finally admit that DeAndre Swift is a good player. But at the same time, I'm going to start him.
Yeah, there was some guy in my mentions for weeks telling me that DeAndre Swift was all floor, and now I haven't heard from him. I also think you should be starting Rome Odunze against the Ravens in this one. Not only has Baltimore allowed the 5th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, but they really struggle in the red zone. They've allowed 10 red zone touchdowns to receivers. That is the most in the NFL. Odunze has a 25% target share when the Bears get in the red zone. He has scored half of their red zone touchdowns this year, and he has half of their end zone targets. So I think everything is going to be funneled through him when they get near the end zone. And then on top of that, with Lamar back, they might just have to throw more than they had to the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm looking to see for Rome Odunze to pick it up. It's been a couple of down weeks for him. An NFC East matchup that we saw just a couple of weeks ago, it's the Giants now heading to Philly to take on the Eagles. And Florio, do you prefer your Batman's skinny or swole?
This week, my Batman is going to have arms as skinny as Ranks because it's Devonta Smith for me. I think he is a start. 10 or more targets in 2 of his last 3 games, and he topped 110 yards in each of those games. Now, the one in that span that he didn't came against the Giants, but you might remember he had a 70-yard touchdown that Jalen Hurts just missed him on, or else he would have had a monstrous day in that game as well. And then the Giants, most yards to wide receivers, 7th most fantasy points, 2nd most yards specifically on deep passes. I think they want to get their lick back a little bit, and I think Devonta Smith has a good week against the Giants.
On the other side, we've been so enamored with Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo in fantasy that we're sort of overlooking what Wan'Dale Robinson is doing. He's a top 20 fantasy receiver. He's top 20 in the league in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. Has a 25% target share in this offense. And the biggest part is that his air yards per target nearly double of what it was last season. He had a good game when these two teams met a couple of weeks ago, went for 20 fantasy points in that one. So while we're all excited about the young quarterback and the young running back there, don't forget about Wan'Dale Robinson, who's actually doing big things in this Giants offense.
Who is that? I already forgot.
Wan'Dale Robinson.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Wan'Dale Robinson. Up next, it is a rematch of Super Bowl 12 with the Cowboys and the Broncos. That day, it was Roger Staubach versus Craig Morton.
Right. Butch Johnson caught a touchdown pass. I think Rick Upchurch fumbled the ball.
Tony Dorsett did some things. Rob
Lytle
was involved.
There,
yeah.
Tom Jackson, I think, was on that team.
Might have been playing that one too.
Danny White was, hey, Florio, raise your hand when you've heard of one of these players. Danny White was a punter.
And a quarterback.
Remember?
Forks up.
That was the best. Every time Danny White went to go punt, they're like, hey, remember, he's the backup quarterback. I'll get to it, Scott. Jeez Louise, Dak Prescott has been playing amazing football this season. As you see right there, the totals on the board are correct because Kendall does them, and I trust him. 5 games with at least 22 fantasy points this season, the second most amongst quarterbacks this year. The only reason I bring this up, because it feels pretty obvious, is that, you know what, the Denver Broncos do have a pretty good defense. They've got a great pass rush, but you know what? They've been vulnerable to some of these quarterbacks. We saw last week, Jackson Dart was pretty good. We saw a couple of weeks ago, another quarterback was able to go out there and get over on them. So I think that this is a real good opportunity for Dak Prescott this week. I think he will put up fantasy points, but I'm still picking the Broncos.
I'm telling you, you must start. Absolutely must start Bo Nix this week. I mean, if you look at his week-to-week totals, it's sort of up and down. He's had some really good games. He's had some sort of games in there. This is not about Bo Nix. This is about the guys on the other side. The Cowboys giving up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. 5 different QBs have had multiple touchdown passes in a game against Dallas. 6 have had at least 18 fantasy points in a game. This is projected to be one of the higher scoring games of the week. Look, I don't know if the Broncos go out and score 33 points in a quarter, but I think they can move the ball, and Bo Nix should absolutely be in fantasy lineups. James Taylor's going to Carolina in his mind. The Buffalo Bills are going there for real. Rank, who do you like in this one between the Bills and the Panthers?
I'm going to say the double deuce, Dalton Schultz himself. Dalton Kincaid. Gosh dang it. Dalton Kincaid. I'm getting them all mixed up. Dalton Kincaid has been playing really well. And with the team that they don't really have the number one alpha wide receiver. They don't have a Justin Jefferson. They don't have a Jamar Chase. So it's Josh Allen, and he's passing around the ball to a bunch of these dudes. And you never really seem to know week to week. But one of the things that I do love about Dalton Kincaid is that he leads the Bills in yards and receptions, receiving yards and receiving touchdowns this season. And it's a great matchup against the Carolina Panthers, who've been very vulnerable to tight ends this season.
Yeah, it was wild how much the Bills missed Dalton Kincaid in their last game. It's also wild that Rico's been in the news all week this week because everyone is so excited for his matchup. He turned 19 opportunities last week into 96 yards, and he is clearly the most explosive runner in this backfield between him and Chuba Hubbard. And the Bills, well, they've allowed explosive runs to running backs at the highest rate in the NFL. They also give up the most yards after contact. I prefer Dowdle of the two, but I do think Chuba is in play because he was a little bit more used in the passing game. But yeah, start Rico this week against the Bills.
Yeah, the Panthers have that there, the one 49er skill position player who hasn't gotten hurt this year, which is probably the last one we would have predicted. We keep rolling on with the 49ers and the Houston Texans, and for all the great things the Niners offense has put together. I'm going to be on the other side of this, and I'm going to tell you, this feels like a week that you can start Dalton Schultz on the Houston Texans side. I don't know if you've heard this, but there are 6 teams on a bye this week, which certainly helps his case. But he's running a lot of routes from the slot, which is where the Niners have been very vulnerable. They've given up the 3rd most yards to slot players, 19 explosive pass plays to slot pass catchers. That is the most in the league. Plus, Texans beat up in that department. Still waiting officially on word for Nico Collins, Christian Kirk. It looks unlikely for them to be on the field this week. Schultz getting a lot of opportunity from C.J. Stroud. So if you're looking for a tight end, he feels like a guy you can slot into your lineup.
Yeah, Schultz is in play, and I think his QB is a sleeper this week because, like many quarterbacks, C.J. Stroud is at his best when not under pressure. In fact, the only current starters with a worse EPA while under pressure this season are Cam Ward and Joe Flacco, and that is Brown's influence. But we have seen C.J. Stroud have a couple of really big fantasy games this year. They came against the Ravens and the Titans, 2 teams that create pressure at a bottom 7 rate in the NFL. Not only are the 49ers in the bottom 7, they are the lowest team when it comes to creating pressure since the Nick Bosa injury. So if you give C.J. Stroud time to throw, I think he will put up numbers, even if his receivers are a little banged up. So with 6 teams on bye, he is definitely a sleeper this week.
The Niners still looking for their first interception in a really long time. Just a weird statistical anomaly. Up next, we've got the Jets and the Bengals. And back to you, Florio. What are you keeping an eye on?
I think you play Breece Hall this week if he plays for the Jets. Not only with Garrett Wilson being banged up, could that mean more targets for him? But Hall has just seen so much volume, 18 opportunities per game. And then this is a fantastic matchup. The Bengals have allowed the second most rushing yards, fourth most receiving, and the most fantasy points per game to running backs. They also allow explosive runs at the third highest rate. And Breece Hall has picked up explosive runs at the third highest rate. So if you're not playing Breece Hall in this matchup with 6 teams on bye, why is he even on your roster?
When I hear about, no, I'm not going to go there. You know what? I'm going to say start all your Bengals this Sunday against the New York Jets. It's one of those situations when I watch this Jets situation unfolding and Garrett Wilson is not going to play again, it always reminds me of like when there's guys like Saquon Barkley was always banged up a lot with the Giants, and now all of a sudden he's the picture of health. CMC battled injuries forever, goes to San Francisco, amazingly healthy. Jalen Ramsey did the same thing. So I wonder if we're in one of those situations where the Jets are on a real down cycle, which means a huge opportunity for the Bengals. Joe Flacco shows that he can throw the football, spreading it around. You don't have to be that generous. Like I know that there's Yoshivas and all these. Like don't throw to them. Only Jamar Chase and only T. Higgins. That's all we need. I'm sure Mike Gesicki's a nice guy. Tell him to take a seat. We don't need. He's fine. We just don't need him.
All right. Now we move on to Foxborough for the Browns and the Patriots. I don't know, this kind of like the Bill Belichick Bowl or something like that?
Ooh, it could be.
Anyway.
Jets is the third man.
There it is. For me, I'm going to tell you, look, I know the Patriots really like Ramondre Stevenson, right? It's the reason that we're rage-dropping Travion Henderson. I'm going to tell you, you might still want to be a little bit wary. And I get it. Look, there's 6 teams on a bye. It might be hard to get away from Ramondre Stevenson this week. But look, man, it's been rough for him so far this year. He's played well in the good matchups. He's struggled in the bad ones. This is a bad matchup for him. Cleveland giving up the fewest fantasy points per game to running backs, second fewest receiving yards to running backs. So I don't know if he's going to do it on the ground or through the air. He's had 4 games scoring 5 or fewer fantasy points this season. So again, maybe you can't completely get away from him, but if you have any other options, I would strongly consider them this week.
You know, it's wild that the Browns do have some viable options as players on the offensive side of the ball, including Harold Fannin Jr., who has had at least 11 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3, leads the team in receptions and receiving yards this season. As a matter of fact, the Browns have the most targets per game to a tight end this year, which means that's where they are funneling all the targets. And the New England Patriots are a little bit vulnerable to the position. They've allowed the 5th most yards per targets to tight ends this season.
All right, so Harold Fannin very much in play. That gets us to our next gen nugget. Time for If You Know, You Know, as we run through some news headlines that could be important for you. We start in the Big Apple, where Garrett Wilson has been ruled out for Sunday with a knee injury. Wilson leads the Jets with 36 receptions for 395 yards on the season. And in D.C., Jaden Daniels will miss this week's marquee matchup against the Chiefs due to a low-grade hamstring strain. Commanders will turn to Marcus Mariota to fill the void on Monday night. All right, so Florio, with Jaden Daniels out, obviously that changes some things in the Commanders' offense. If you were putting together a lineup with Commanders in it, who is the one guy there that you trust the most?
Yeah, ideally, I don't want to play the receivers. Terry's first game back, more target count there. But I do think Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is in play this week for fantasy managers because I expect them, one, to just try to run the ball as much as possible and keep Patrick Mahomes on the sideline. But also, he's been dominating volume. 77% of the running back carries over the last 3 weeks has gone his way. He has also led that backfield in routes in that span. And while the Chiefs might look on paper like a tough matchup, they've allowed a higher than league average yards per carry, yards before and after contact, and explosive run rate. So if you give Bill this much volume, I think he could still come through for fantasy purposes.
Oh, I'm such a child. But I'm going to, the explosive runs thing, if you had spent time in the household this week, it would have an entirely different meaning for you. But because of their vulnerability to allowing big runs, Deebo Samuel does give me some intrigue because they can find creative ways to get him the football. And I think with Marcus Mariota, Cliff Kingsbury is going to really need to rely on his creativity with it. So As I'm sitting here, again, I wouldn't ideally want to be starting Deebo Samuel in this situation, but given everything with the 6 teams on a bye, I know we're going on and on about this. There's a real opportunity for Deebo where if you're in a real tough situation, I think he could have a little bit of value for you.
I am starting Terry McLaurin in a league. I'm not super jazzed about it, but that's just sort of the way things worked out for me this week. Back to the game previews, though. We're going to get to the Sunday night game between the Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers going against his former club is sort of the headline story there. I am not exactly the Steelers tight end whisperer the way Michael F. Florio is, but I'm going to spin the wheel, and I'm going to give you Jonnu Smith as a sleeper this week. Now, 3 of the top 5 most targeted Steelers this season are all playing the tight end position. Of that group, it is Jonnu Smith that leads in routes run and in targets. We've been targeting the Packers all year when it comes to tight ends, giving up the second most fantasy points per game, as you see that. 2 tight ends, giving up 4 touchdowns to the position over the last 3 games. So, look, I think Jonnu Smith is the guy, but we saw last week it could be anybody. It could be Pat Freiermuth, whose birthday actually is this weekend.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, I like the tight ends, but I really like Aaron Rodgers this week. I think he is a sleeper. Look, Rodgers could say this is not a revenge game, but does anyone believe him? Like, I think anytime the Steelers get near the end zone, they are going to be throwing the ball a bunch. Plus, Rodgers has averaged 20 fantasy points per game in his last 2 games. And the Packers, while they are a tough defense, they low-key have allowed the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks in the last month. So people in Pittsburgh are going to be fired up. They're going to be more excited for this than anything since the Good AM 10-year anniversary release last night. So shout out to Pittsburgh and Mac Miller.
I didn't think we'd squeeze a Mac Miller reference in there, but it's Florio, so I shouldn't be surprised.
Big welcome back to NFL Fantasy Live as we sit here, roll along with our game previews. And Michael F. Florio, let me see. I want to see if I have this correct. You're a lot like Katy Perry. You're in and you're out. You're hot and you're cold. You fight, you break up, you kiss, you make up. What is going on with Kyle Pitts?
I was wondering where you were going with that. I said last week I'm no longer the Kyle Pitts guy, but maybe I guess I'm becoming it again because I think you start him again this week against the Dolphins. Last week, team high 10 targets, turned it into 7 catches and 62 yards. It's just a great matchup. The Dolphins have allowed the 5th most yards to tight ends. They've struggled against the slot, and Kyle Pitts leads the Falcons in slot snaps. I was trying to think of a Katy Perry lyric to throw back at you on the fly, but I'm coming up blank.
You change your mind like the Browns change quarterbacks. I don't know. Let's talk about Drake London, who has had at least 25 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games. He is averaging over 10 targets per game this season. That's 3rd most in the NFL. And then we have the Miami Dolphins. They're not playing really good football. They've allowed the 10th most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers this season. Feel confident playing all your Falcons. Even Darnell Mooney would be a nice little sleeper. Let's keep it down south. Let's go to New Orleans, and let's talk a little bit about the New Orleans Saints. Now, earlier today, Kellen Moore came out and said that my guy, Devin Neal, that I've been talking about all week, is going to see an uptick. So I think that he's a sleeper in this one. Actually, might be a little bit better than a sleeper. He's a 6th-round draft pick out of Kansas, and he's looked pretty good. This is one of the things that I noticed last week, that Alvin Kamara, it might be not. It might be like one of those bands. We were joking before the break, like Duran Duran is not going to sell out Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Maybe the Smoothie King Center next door. That's what it feels like with Alvin Kamara, which is why I feel comfortable going with Devin Neal. Now the Buccaneers have allowed a top 7 running back in each of the last 2 weeks, which is pretty staggering. But what about you, Michael? Who do you got sleeper-wise?
Sleeper, I'm going with Tez Johnson here, who last week played nearly 70% of the snaps, and he saw 9 targets, which should not be overlooked. Turned that into 4 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. But the Bucs don't have Mike Evans. They don't have Chris Godwin. But what they do have is Tez Johnson, and it seems like he has the trust of Baker Mayfield right now. Plus, the Saints have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points per target to wide receivers. So Tez Johnson is a firework. He's going to go out there this week and show them what he's worth.
You know what? My pick for MVP. Let's keep it a buck here with the Tennessee Titans, who have not been playing well this season, but you do believe there's somebody they can start.
I think there's someone you could sit actually in this one.
I'm not going to read the. I was
think-
trying to maintain eye contact. I wasn't going to read the cue there.
No, I give you credit. It's hard to drive the train, but I think Tony Pollard is a sit, as he is yet to reach 15 fantasy points this season, single digits in 3 different games. Plus, tough matchup. The Colts have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. And hot take, the Titans are likely to be trailing in this one.
What?
Which means you can't really run the ball. If you want to bank on catch-up targets for your running back, sure, but that's not the way I like to live my fantasy life.
All right, I want to give a little love to Daniel Jones. Obviously, you're probably going to be starting him, but I want to point out he's had at least 22 fantasy points in 2 straight games, 2 touchdown passes in each of the last 3. This might have some meaning to some other people who play other forms of fantasy football this week. Daniel Jones is going to be a guy who will probably be rostered in a lot of leagues. If you know what I'm saying, but still wanted to give him a little bit of love for the great work that he's done. Now, I'm Omar Ruiz with wait, that prompter's not for me. There are a lot of notable quarterbacks on a bye this week. A lot of the kids are calling it Bye-Mageddon. Here to help you through these troubled times is my friend, Marcus Grant.
Thank you so much, Adam Rank. Yeah, it's one thing to put that together visually. We talk about Bye-Mageddon and what that sort of means, but it's one thing to see it like that. So I just wanted to take just a little bit of your time and kind of help you through this week. Put a minute on the clock if you don't mind. You ever have one of those bad days? It isn't really a bad day. It's just sort of bad enough to be annoying. I mean, you remember to take your earbuds, but then you find out they don't have any juice. You get in the car, the gas tank light comes on. Then all of a sudden, it's like 3 o'clock. You realize you're wearing 2 different colored shoes. So all you got to do is sit back at that point and just say, you know what? I'm taking an L today. That's what Bye-Mageddon's going to be like for some of you out there. I mean, that draft start you had with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, and Trey McBride, it was hitting for several weeks, and it will again. Just not this week. Look, Sonic and Knuckles, they are on team take the week off zone. Meanwhile, JSN, BYE. Look, let's keep it a buck here. You're not going to go and blow up your entire roster for a collection of 1-week fill-in guys. So what do you do in that situation? Well, my advice to you is just take the week off. Make it your own bye week. Enjoy it. Let's go see a movie. Catch up with an old friend. Read the next chapter of that book you started in January. Promise you finish by Thanksgiving. Still have that opportunity. But you know what? Don't check your fantasy team because you're probably going to take an L. There you go. This has been A Minute with Marcus.